and a very warm welcome to a brand new episode of World Panorama, the only show that gives you a 360-degree view of major global news. I'm Sana Khan. Before we get you detailed reports, here's a look at the top stories this week. US presidential debate hots up. Republican Mitt Romney and President Barack Obama make subtle jabs on foreign policy. French president finally bites the bullet, unveils toughest ever budget with tax hikes and major spending cuts. Senkaku Island dispute threatens to escalate further. US presses China to resolving the maritime issue with Japan in a peaceful manner. And sports world champion Vishwanathan Anand to lock horns with Russian Sergei Karjakin in round 4 of the 5th final Masters. And straight to the story in focus this week. With the United Nations as a backdrop, President Barack Obama and Republican challenger Mitt Romney engaged in a de facto debate on foreign policy this week. While Obama defended his record in the turbulent Middle East, Romney vowed to act more decisively in the interests of the US and its allies, particularly Israel. The back and forth on international affairs came amid a campaign that until recently had focused entirely on the US economy and domestic issues. In the barbed exchanges, what was notable was that neither candidate put forth a national security agenda that would inspire Americans to support a strong economy to fulfill that agenda. In fact, their foreign goals seem subordinate to simply fixing the economy. We will be discussing the focus that is on the foreign policy matters in the US presidential elections. And for that, I'm pleased to welcome Professor K.P. Vijaylakshmi from the Center for Canadian, US and Latin American Studies from the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Welcome to the show, ma'am. Now, before that, here's a wrap-up of this week's events.
So how do you win the manufacturing state of Ohio? Tell them it's the other guy who plans to send their jobs to China.
Fewer Americans are working today than when President Obama took office. It doesn't have to be this way. If Obama would stand up to China. China is stealing American ideas and technology, everything from computers to fighter jets. 7 times Obama could have taken action. 7 times he said no. His policies cost us 2 million jobs.
President Barack Obama and Republican Mitt Romney did just that on campaign stops throughout the heartland state.
He's been talking tough on China. He says he's going to take the fight to him. You know, when you hear this newfound outrage, when you see these ads he's running promising to get tough on China, it feels a lot like that fox saying, you know, we need more secure chicken coops.
Obama was responding to this Romney campaign commercial.
Romney invested in China's version of YouTube, a haven for stealing American videos. And Romney's even invested in a Chinese electronics company being sued by Microsoft for pirating its software. If Romney really wanted China to stop stealing, why would he send them his money?
Confronted with polls that have shown Obama building significant leads in the key states of Ohio and Florida, the Republicans have sought to reach out to working-class voters while bashing Obama on foreign policy and his handling of trade with China.
And when their prices are low and then they compete with our manufacturers, our guys go out of business and people lose jobs. And that's why one thing I will do from day one is label China a currency manipulator. They must not steal jobs in an unfair way.
Earlier, Mitt Romney attacked Obama's foreign policy record, saying his remarks indicated that Obama viewed the United States as being at the mercy of developments in the Middle East rather than helping to shape events there.
He said the developments in the Middle East are bumps in the road. Yeah, that was my reaction. Bumps in the road. We had an ambassador assassinated. We had a Muslim Brotherhood member elected to the presidency of Egypt. 20,000 people have been killed in Syria.
Until now, the campaign has been concerned mostly with the economy, and foreign policy has been viewed largely as a strength for the president. But the recent unrest in the Muslim world, revealed in the attack in Benghazi, Libya, that killed Ambassador J. Christopher Stevens and 3 other Americans, has exposed Obama politically and been seized upon by Romney as the product of what he calls the president's weak engagement of the world.
Let me turn to my guest this week, Professor Vijaylakshmi. First of all, from economy, the focus had to, at one point or the other, move to foreign policy issues. What do you think really triggered off this shift?
Well, you know, this is a month in which the American president also addresses the UN. So clearly he's going to use that to make an international speech. And clearly the challenger would be also getting ready, because the presidential debates are going to begin on 3rd of October.
Right.
And by the end of October, the last debate, which is going to be televised, is going to be fully on foreign policy. So this is an expected turning. But there are also events, what we would call as the external stimuli. You know, you look at the internal and the processes and the external. The external was certainly the Libyan, situation. And I think there was a great deal of both the campaigns were wondering whether we should use this and we should not use it. You know, the Mitt Romney campaign has been criticized for being somewhat muted in his criticism. But there are other pieces I've seen in media reports that argue that Romney held his peace because this is not a moment to make it partisan. He would probably bring it up in the debate when he has to unveil his own policy. Because both of them are basically looking at two very major concerns for America. One is terrorism, and especially defeating the jihadis.
Right.
And the other is about the rise of China and competing in an Asian century or competing with Asia itself. So these are the two broad main sort of motives that both the both campaigns will probably focus on. But interestingly, the Romney campaign, I think, has had another chance because he made some terrible sort of gaffes, if you like, or blunders, if you like, on domestic situation by calling almost 47% of Americans as freeloaders in a closed-door donor meeting. But nevertheless, it's been out, and clearly that's not helping him. And so what we saw about a couple of months ago, or even a month ago, as almost statistical heat, some people called it, but a very small percentage. You know, one can never say anything about statistics, but it seemed to be, you know, it was going up and down, and, you know, people were watching with great interest. And then suddenly you see a surge for the president, and clearly the president was enjoying that moment of triumph when Libya happened.
Right.
And that was not exactly covering his campaign with glory, because the embassy seemed to have stated that it was, you know, the fault lies somewhere in our own intolerance, which is not the appropriate response that another campaigner who's, you know, pushing for the rise and show of American power is going to let go.
Also, an important point that I would like to bring up is Ohio. You know, both these candidates campaign in Ohio, which is supposed to be very, very critical. There are also talk of those 10% undecided voters. How much of, you know, foreign policy matters do you think are going to swing those votes for or against any of these candidates?
Well, let me put it to you this way, Sana. Even in foreign policy, polls after polls that I've seen, in foreign policy issues, the number one issue for Americans, 80% of Americans, is protection of their jobs.
Right.
That's the number one. And about, say, similarly, about, say, 40 or 50% would also talk about lessening U.S. dependence on oil. I mean, you can relate, you know, there's now an intersection between the domestic and the foreign, because we're talking only foreign policy today. So there are some elements of these underpinnings of domestic concerns. So in both of these, what would you look at then? China, Iran. So look up any campaign of, you know, reports from any of the wide variety of American media that we have, both in the print and the visual media, broadcast media included. We get the picture that, you know, there is going to be a serious outlining of their policies on both towards Iran and towards China, because this is clearly what, you know, the number two, first one and two. But on the broad sense, Americans today, I think most polls reveal, think about the world much more negatively than before, because they are not really interested in, you know, changing the world or making the world safe for democracy. So, you know, the early remarks that you made were very apt, that, you know, harnessing economic power to go abroad and, you know, do other things. That is not there. So there may be more difficulties ahead for both these campaigns, unless they can be very specific, which is why I expect them to really talk about Iran and China. And Iran would also bring in Israel and the troubled relationship that President Obama has had with Israel.
Do you think also at the Clinton Global Initiative, where Obama and Romney both spoke just before Obama was going ahead and, you know, about to speak at the UNGA, both these candidates really failed to address the real problems, the real issues, and they failed, you know, their chance to talk big, communicate with the Americans, tell them that, you know, they're there, and, just fighting for that spot. They didn't just do that, did they?
Well, we'll have to think about, which is the spot that you want to pick as either a challenger or an incumbent. Now, Clinton himself is a Democrat.
Right.
Do you think that crowd is really going to be cheering for a Romney speech? So Romney's calculations might have been that, there are many other places where he's going to make a bigger pitch. But both of them spoke on certain very broadly, I would say, nuances of foreign policy of the United States in general. We have noticed that over the years, the US foreign policy aid has come down quite a lot in their instruments of foreign policy. And Romney was arguing that foreign aid today is really largely driven by private sector, the private donations or private investments. And therefore, that is a much better conviction, to follow the American dream and to follow, the American dream is not only about, a great home, but it's about having a good job and a good life and happiness and freedom and all of that. So this motive of having an American dream is what he's talking about. And Obama is talking about a caring America or a compassionate America when he addresses, well, it's his home crowd in some ways, because, anybody who gets a good word from Clinton, obviously, that man would do well. It was quite clear in the Democratic convention. But nevertheless, Barack Obama spent time talking about some issue which I think, unites the world in terms of human trafficking. So you get actually a broad picture of an American dream or an American prosperity and caring America. So in a sense, these are two issues that would keep turning once the elections are over. These nuances might still characterize some parts of America's foreign policy.
Absolutely. So probably, both the candidates are saving the best on foreign policy for the last debate that is scheduled for the 26th of October. We'll have to wrap up on that. Thanks so much, Professor Vijaylakshmi, for joining me here with your perspective. We'll take a short break here. Israel's Netanyahu brings fears about Iran's nuclear ambitions to UN, believes sanctions have failed. Stay tuned for this and more. You're watching World Panorama. France on Friday unveiled action to plug a €37 billion hole in its public finances with the toughest package of tax rises and spending cuts the country has known in an economic downturn. The budget was the first since Hollande was elected president in June. With this, Hollande has seen his approval ratings freefall, and he is now on the verge of becoming the most unpopular French leader in living memory. Here's more.
Hoping to safeguard the country's position at the core of the Eurozone, France's 2013 budget is its toughest single belt-tightening in 30 years. The budget approved by France's cabinet on Friday said that the creation of a new 75% tax on millionaires and higher marginal tax rates on high earners would raise some €530 million next year.
C'est un budget de combat pour le redressement du pays.
This is a budget which also requires an effort. But it is a just effort. Income taxation will not impact the middle and working classes. 90% of the French who pay income tax will not face higher taxation. This is a guarantee that we give the French.
C'est un budget de combat pour la justice sociale.
But not all welcome the move.
They want to cut the budget deficit by 30 billion, which means we can go from 4.5% of GDP this year to 3% deficit next year. So the arithmetic is here. The question mark is about how much this budget is going to impact negatively the GDP growth.
France's unemployment touched the 3 million mark for the first time in 13 years, adding to the country's worries as it tries to revive its sluggish economy.
I think one simply needs to be realistic when the growth prospects are what they are. The government has revised its forecast to 0.8% and others are forecasting even less growth in 2012.
But with record unemployment and a barrage of data pointing to economic stagnation, there are fears the deficit target will slip as France falls short of the modest 0.8% economic growth rate on which it is banking for next year.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu used his turn at the United Nations podium to warn Iran. He said Iran was as little as 12 months away from being able to build a nuclear bomb. His rhetoric has fueled speculation about a possible Israeli attack on Iran between March and August next year. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu drew a red line for Iran's nuclear program on Thursday, despite a US refusal to set an ultimatum, saying Tehran will be on the brink of developing a nuclear weapon in less than a year.
A red line should be drawn right here. Before Iran completes the second stage of nuclear enrichment necessary to make a bomb, before Iran gets to a point where it's a few months away or a few weeks away from amassing enough enriched uranium to make a nuclear weapon.
Netanyahu was referring to Iran's enrichment of uranium to 20% purity, a level it says is required for medical isotopes, but which also brings it close to bomb fuel grade.
And I believe that faced with a clear red line, Iran will back down. And this will give more time for sanctions and diplomacy to convince Iran to dismantle its nuclear weapons program altogether.
This after Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, addressing the UN General Assembly on Wednesday, denounced military threats against Tehran by uncivilized Zionists.
Testing new generations of ultra-modern weaponry and the pledge to disclose these armaments on due time is now being used as a new language of threat against nations to coerce them into accepting a new era of hegemony. Continued threat by uncivilized Zionists to resort to military action against a great nation is a clear example of this bitter reality.
Netanyahu's remarks also seem to deliver a two-part message to the White House, along with Iran's leaders, his most important audience, signaling that the hawkish Prime Minister wanted an end to the public war of words in Washington over Iran's suspected nuclear ambitions. The war of words between Asian rivals China and Japan over a 7 square kilometer piece of an island has nothing but further aggravated. And this time tensions are already high and China is contending with a tricky once-in-a-decade leadership change, while Japan's ruling party faces a probable drubbing in an election expected in months. A look at this week's developments.
Stepping up the offensive against Japan over island dispute, China on Thursday called Japanese PM Yoshihiko Noda's comments as disappointing and wrong.
Tokyo must take full responsibility for what it has done. We demand Japan to stop any illusion, take concrete measures to correct its mistakes, and return to the track of negotiation so as to create conditions for the improvement of bilateral ties.
China reiterated its position on the Diaoyu Islands as Shinzo Abe won the presidential election of Japan's main opposition, Liberal Democratic Party. China's counter-attack comes a day after Japanese PM called the disputed islands in East China Sea as undisputable and inherent part of Japan.
As far
as Senkaku Islands are concerned, they are the inherent part of our territory in light of history and also of international law. It's very clear, and there are no territorial issues as such. Therefore, there could not be any compromise, which means setbacks from this basic position. I have to make it clear.
The face-off between two nations was triggered ever since Japan purchased an island group in the East China Sea known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China. The islands have been claimed by China, Japan and Taiwan.
NASA's Mars rover sends back first of its kind evidence of presence of water on Mars. Details coming up in a minute. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying with us. Time now to take a look at some of the other international developments in a quick wrap. Here's Globe Watch.
WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange called himself a free man on Wednesday in a teleconference broadcast from the Ecuadorian embassy in London to the United States in New York. Ecuador granted political asylum to Assange on August 16th, a day after it said Britain had threatened to raid the Ecuadorian embassy in London to arrest the former hacker. The United Nations Security Council held a high-level meeting on the Syria crisis on Wednesday as the bloody 18-month-old conflict raged on with no end in sight. The UN Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon warned the Security Council, which met on the sidelines of the General Assembly meeting, that if a solution is not found, the crisis could spill over into a wider conflict that could drag in regional powers. South Korea celebrated its 64th Army Day on Tuesday amid tensions with its neighbor North Korea. Defense Minister Kim Kwon-yin reviewed the troops as about 14,000 civilians and war veterans, along with soldiers and marines, attended the ceremony in Gyeonggi, south of Seoul. More than 50 planes performed stunts in the sky, and about 400 special armed forces displayed their martial arts skills. NASA's Mars rover has found clear evidence its landing site was once awash in water, a key ingredient for life. Scientists suspect the mound known as Mount Sharp is the remains of sediment that once completely filled the crater. Analysis of a slab of rock located between the crater's north rim and the base of Mount Sharp indicate a fast-moving stream of water once flowed there.
And well, if you've missed the week's biggest sporting events, here's your chance to catch up. We bring you sports action. Fresh from his side 6-0 win in the Capital One Cup, Chelsea skipper John Terry arrived at Wembley on Wednesday as a hearing into alleged racist comments he made to Anton Ferdinand continued. Terry has been before a Football Association tribunal since Monday, facing charges of racially abusing Queen's Park Rangers defender Anton Ferdinand last October, despite being acquitted in the law courts in July. Rafael Nadal's steady recuperation from a knee injury is proceeding according to plan, and he's not going to rush back before it has healed properly. In a recent interview at a commercial partners event in Madrid, the 11 times Grand Slam singles champion said he was still feeling some pain in his left knee and would only return to the court when that was no longer the case. World champion Vishwanathan Anand could not break the ice for the third day running and drew with Fabiano Caruana of Italy in the third round of 5th final chess masters. Anand in fact had to defend for a long time against the youngest participant in the tournament, and it was only after a stubborn defense that the Indian ace could force a draw. After 2 more rounds, the attention shifts to Bilbao in Spain, where the final half of the Super Tournament will be played. And now time for all the very latest news from the world of movies and lifestyle. Here's our entertainment wrap.
The 64th annual Emmy Awards were held in Los Angeles, and Homeland toppled Mad Men to win the top drama prize. The show, a post-9/11 psychological thriller, won Best Drama after 1 season on cable channel Showtime. It also took home trophies for Best Writing and Best Acting for its 2 leads, Claire Danes and Damian Lewis. On the comedy side, Modern Family won. It was the 3rd year in a row that the series took home the top prize. Hollywood favourite Michael J. Fox received a standing ovation when he took the stage at the 64th Annual Primetime Emmy Awards. Fox, who suffers from Parkinson's disease, walked the red carpet and posed for photographs as well. The 51-year-old will be making a return to the small screen in a new series loosely based on his own life. Elizabeth Banks arrived on the red carpet singing the praises of the musical comedy Pitch Perfect, which had its world premiere on 24th September in Los Angeles. Directed by Jason Moore, the film stars Anna Kendrick plays out across the campus of Barden University, where an all-girls singing group takes on the all-male rivals in a campus competition. Pitch Perfect opens in select theatres on 28th of September. Sculpted leather jackets contrasted with lightweight silk ropes dominates Roberto Cavalli's show in Milan. Cocktail dresses emphasize craftsmanship with their intricate embroideries. The Florentine designer, known for making his own prints, mixes famous animalia patterns with deco motifs. A chubby rapping singer wearing a tacky suit has earned the title of most liked on YouTube. Over 2.6 million people have given Psy's music video Gangnam Style the stamp of approval, which is a Guinness World Record. Currently, Gangnam Style is number 1 in 31 countries on the iTunes charts.
That's all we have for you in this edition of World Panorama. I'll be back next week, same time, with more world news. Till then, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. This week, we wrap up with visuals straight from the world's largest and most famous beer festival, the annual Oktoberfest, which opened in Munich for the 179th time. The organizers expect around 7 million visitors to consume about the same number in liters of beer and party. Goodbye and thanks for watching.